With the release of Slayer, Guilty Gear Strive Season 3 has pretty much wrapped up. But despite them adding so many fan favorite characters, many high level players are just not happy with the game right now. Today I'm going to answer this question by looking at what I think is good about the game right now and what I think is bad about the game right now. I want to start this with a positive note because I think there's a lot of stuff that's good about the game right now. So for starters, since they added an additional 4 characters, right now this game just has a ton of characters. It might sound funny, especially if you're just thinking about the game at this moment, but on launch, people really complain about there not being a lot of characters in the game. Guilty Gear Strive launched with 15 characters, which is about the same as Exerd actually on launch 2. But as of right now, Guilty Gear Strive has the most characters that have been in a Guilty Gear game ever. Both Guilty Gear Accent Core Plus R and Guilty Gear Exerd Revelator both have 25 characters. So, and if Arc System Works continue their DLC character pattern, then in Season 4, which was already announced, we can expect another 4 characters to be added to the game. Lots of characters means lots of variety of playstyles, lots of options for people who like different type of characters as well. And for tournaments, the opportunity for a lot of diversity. As in, it's just likely you're going to see a bunch of different characters in tournaments, even if at the end of the events you kind of see the same characters rise to the top. Another big thing for me are stages, and this one is really important to me actually because I played Dragon Ball FighterZ before this, and I always felt like one of the biggest missed opportunities of that game were stages. Guilty Gear is an original IP. It's basically Daisuke's fanfiction, for lack of a better word, headcanon, whatever you want to call it. The locales in this game are just beautiful, even for those of us who pick the same stage over and over. The game came out in 2021, and one of the biggest announcements was how they were changing the Gatling system compared to the previous Guilty Gear games, and it was a huge deal at the time. At the time, my main thoughts mostly went around removing Gatlings that people tended to not use, and making it easier to learn how to fight characters because everyone had the same Gatling string. But one thing I've added since then that I didn't realize, because Guilty Gear is typically a character specialist game, is that everyone having the same Gatlings also makes it far easier to play multiple characters. While in tournaments people still tend to only play one character, it is very common to see high level players just trying out new characters as DLC or messing around with characters to learn how to fight them better or just get a deeper understanding of the character in general. Where in Guilty Gear Exerd, I only really played 2 characters, Milia and then near the end of my time in the game, Johnny. I played far more characters in Strive because of this change. So, for reference then, characters I've mained in the game are of course Milia, my main from Exerd, and Baiken, but I've also played Johnny, Testament, Abba, who I still play, Leo, who I'm playing right now, Faust in Season 1, Axel also in Season 1, Chip in Season 3.0, Kai in Season 1, a little into Season 1 though, Potemkin in Season 2, Mei in Season 2, Ram in Season 3, Giovanna in Season 1 and 2, Zato in Season 1, Gold Lewis on launch, Happy Chaos in Season 1 and 2, Elfo for about 3 weeks or so after release, and Slayer as well. So I've had the opportunity to play far more characters than I would normally be able to in a Guilty Gear game. So you can really explore a lot of different angles in the game because there's so many characters, each with their own unique stuff. They're not that hard to hop into, especially if you play the game a lot and see what people have done already with the character, in addition to them adding new tools over time. So outside of Wild Assault, they've been giving Season 1 characters new moves. So like Milia's new move, Artemis, or Mei getting follow-ups to her dolphins. So to me, the playing aspect of the game has been much expanded. It's really fun to just dig in deep. So then what's bad about the game right now? Well, the elephant in the room is Wild Assault. In Season 3.5, Wild Assault got a bunch of changes. So one is how much burst that Wild Assault takes away from you on hit and on block. So now Wild Assault takes away the same amount on block and on hit, and Charged Wild Assault no longer takes more. It takes the same amount as a normal one. Red Wild Assault actually takes away more risk on hit than normal, which is a nerf, and Charged Red Wild Assault itself actually is 1 frame slower than it used to be. White Wild Assault goes 44% further than it did in 3.0. Even though it takes away less burst on hit or block, it is much more threatening in the neutral game against a big body. Blue Wild Assault also got some changes, but the 2 main culprits really are red and white. And while the general system changes to Wild Assault were received positively, after playing this version since December, a lot of people are still not satisfied with the changes to the individual Wild Assaults, red and white. So the main thing here is, despite nerfing the damage to burst, the conversion ability offered by Red Water Assault is still a pretty big deal. In a previous version, basically Mei would not get much off hits like this unless it's counter hit, where now from the beginning of the round, for half your burst, you have the ability to convert, and that price is not that high considering you're going to go into positive bonus and get that burst back. In the case of White Water Assault, to be honest, I see the idea behind it because typically big body characters have problems getting in legitimately, and some characters have really strong neutral strategies from full screen. We've seen characters like Happy Chaos dominate the meta of Guilty Gear for more than a year. I feel like White Water Assault combined with the main ways they tend to make big body characters better in fighting games in general created a messy cocktail for really dominating neutral and having just a ton of chances to come back in games. In the case of Goldlewis Dixon, he has White Water Assault, he has Drone, he has this Laser Super, in addition to having some neutral tools that are just kind of hard to respond to. Plus, him having high HP means that he is just gonna have a lot of opportunities to get burst back. So the amount of hits I did, plus it's okay damage, plus also getting extra burst when you get wall splat. So White Water Assault characters, similar to Red Water Assault characters, can use their burst very liberally and can expect to get their burst back routinely. So you get the benefit of having access to combo breakers, but also having a very powerful neutral tool that many characters can't really respond to. Definitely non-reaction, you have to pretty much predict it. And it has an advantage, and it has Guard Crush, which these characters also thrive on. That being said though, I do see the vision behind the burst changes. The popular characters in this game tend to have ways of just locking you out of the game when you reach a certain point of the match. So characters getting burst back quickly at the bare minimum gives people a chance the next round. It's a tricky balance they have to play. There are a bunch of characters in this game that would just pretty much hit you, and then if you're not successful at the burst, you would just lose the whole game if they had their way. So you're looking at characters like Asuka or Happy Chaos or Zato, and control characters are just going to be popular amongst high level players. Reducing the amount of volatility in the game is always going to be one of the main goals of a super sweaty player. But on the other hand, high HP characters that kill you in 2 hits, also having near full screen invincible pokes, is the other extreme of you're hitting them all the time and you're not killing them and they're bursting you over and over and over and using Wild Assault to get in and basically like as a jump scare. I personally think the burst change is good. It's good to have more opportunities for the players to engage. Again, fighting games are about making choices, so the more choices you can make per round, in my opinion, the better. So in my opinion, a lot of the complaints that are coming about the game's burst and Wild Assault right now come from a lot of strong characters having red or white Wild Assault and having a lot of opportunities to use them a lot. You'll hear this called the current burst economy of Guilty Gear Strive. So what would I like to see ArcSys do about this then? Many people are calling for Wild Assault nerfs, but I actually think there's a couple of clever ways that ArcSys can handle this. I don't think they're really going to revert any system mechanic changes, and Wild Assault does add stuff to the game. How we complain about Red and Wild Assault aside, since Wild Assault is cancelable into all attacks and is jump cancelable, it actually opens up options in a pretty interesting way in my opinion. And one thing I actually noticed is we did get 4 DLC characters this season, right? And 3 of these characters have blue Wild Assault. Johnny, I'm assuming they made him with Wild Assault in mind. To be honest, when they showed Slayer and he had blue Wild Assault, I thought it was extremely telling because Slayer is a character that's about invincibility. His main gimmick in older games was that he could apply invincibility on special moves and his jump in order to escape things that other characters cannot escape and attack in unique ways and all sorts of things. So one thing they could actually do is instead of having the 3 colors of Wild Assault, they could have just Wild Assault, just one type, and everyone has blue Wild Assault. Blue Wild Assault still has strong properties. It's a very advantageous guard crush. Since there's a gap at point blank, even off high blocks and moves, you can counter overthrow, or you can try to backdash, which makes it want to use other moves in order to catch you. So despite blue Wild Assault also being strong, there's more room for counterplay than the other 2. So if everyone had blue Wild Assault, that means everyone would have counterplay to their Wild Assault. Another alternative is to change properties of red and white Wild Assault again. For example, make it cost more. So all the Wild Assaults cost 50 right now, so half your burst. So having red Wild Assault costs 75% or even 80% of your burst. I've even heard as much as red Water Assault should use your entire burst, because a lot of characters are able to break the wall from basically anywhere with it. So even if you spent your whole burst, you'd be getting some part of that back with positive anyway. Where white Water Assault could also cost 75% to 100% of the burst if they keep it as is. While white Water Assault for your entire burst might sound pretty expensive, in the case of characters that build risk really quickly and have a lot of pressure resets, having an invincible move that is plus on top of this just gives them the opportunity to do a ton of chip damage and build a lot of risk. Of course, I could have used Faultless Defense to minimize some of the damage I took and things like that, but just the fact that he's able to technically do this is pretty crazy, and if he hits you, he's going to break the wall and get that burst back. So while white Water Assault isn't as direct, let's say, as red Water Assault, just giving you the combo that breaks the wall, it still gives you the situation that can lead into that overwhelming situation. I personally would prefer changes to Water Assault again, rather than them nerfing how much burst you build on a wild spot, because I do think it is important to have that. I do think it's important for the person who is defending to have options to escape, and I don't want people complaining about high HP characters or high guts characters getting their burst back multiple times to take away from that thing. Finally, the last thing I'd like to see is just a little bit more communication on when things are coming out. I know that they have their own work schedule. Of course, I'm not trying to complain about them not working fast enough or not putting in enough hours or whatever, but I also definitely think a huge part about a lot of high level players complaining about the game is nobody really knows when the next version is going to be. In the case of the World Tour, the tour is split into 2 seasons again. So season 3.5, which we're playing on right now, and season 4 whenever that comes out, and then also there's usually a winter patch on top of that, like the one we saw with Elfelt. So a theoretical season 4.5 also, so maybe even 3 patches. If they communicated timelines faster on when things are coming, I think people would be complaining a lot less. A pretty common take among high-level players is, why have they not announced the date for Season 4 yet? They have had a couple of opportunities. 1, after the World Tour Finals this year, and 2, after EVO Japan. Those were really good times to do it, honestly. Even after Combo Breaker, I think people would have been pretty happy to get some news. At this point, I think everyone's pretty much accepted that EVO will be played on the current patch, and we'll get something after. But again, just hearing it from the horse's mouth would be really good. And I really agree with this as well. I would also kind of like to know what's going on with the game that I'm maining. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. So a lot of complaints are about wall assault and bursts, and I do think it's valid, but it definitely is a narrow line to toe. So I'm actually really looking forward to what Arc System Works does next. As usual, if you have any questions or comments, definitely feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I do have a Medify, medify.gg/@LordKnight. If any of you guys are interested in coaching, I'm trying to let people know now that I do this, so go ahead, head over there, like and subscribe if you guys feel like it, and I'll see y'all next time. Peace out.